Your car isn't resting overnight. It's working, and nearly everything it does between the moment you walk away and the moment you come back is costing you something. Does yours crank a little slower than it did a year ago? Is the first minute of the drive rougher than the rest of it, or does it need a jump after sitting 5 days when it never used to? That isn't age catching up with your car. That's what's happening in your driveway while you're asleep. After 20 years on the shop floor and better than 3,000 cars, I'll tell you plainly that the overnight hours wear out a high-mileage car faster than most of the actual driving does. Nobody sells you a service for it because there isn't one to sell. The one at number 9 starts the second you shut the door. The one at number 1 isn't something you can hear, and it doesn't stop when you lock the car and walk inside. It's a decision the manufacturer made before your car ever rolled onto the lot, and you've been paying for it every night since. Understand all 9, and you can pull years out of a battery, a fuel pump, and an engine you already own free and clear. Number 9. Water forming inside your fuel tank. Every gallon of fuel you're not carrying is a gallon of air, and that air came from outside with humidity in it. When the temperature drops overnight, that moisture condenses on the cool metal and plastic walls of the tank and runs down into the fuel. Water is heavier than gasoline, so it settles at the bottom, which is exactly where the pickup for your fuel pump sits. Here's what they don't want you knowing. Modern pump gas is cut with ethanol, and ethanol grabs onto water and holds it in suspension. The industry sells that as a feature. What it actually means is that the water gets pulled through the strainer, through the pump, and up to your injectors instead of sitting quietly in the corner of the tank. I've dropped a lot of fuel tanks on cars past 150,000 miles, and there's a pattern you can't miss. The tanks from cars that lived on a quarter tank have a rust ring or a brown sludge line around the bottom seam, and the ones from drivers who kept it above half look almost new inside. The fix costs you nothing but a habit. In fall and spring, when you get 30 and 40-degree swings between afternoon and sunrise, park it overnight with more than half a tank. That's the season this happens, not deep winter. Big daily temperature swings drive condensation, not steady cold. A fuel pump on most of these cars is $600 to $900 once you count dropping the tank. That one's slow damage though. The next one does its worst in the first 10 seconds after you turn the key. Number 8, your oil draining off the engine and into the pan. Shut the engine off and gravity goes to work. Over 8 or 9 hours, the oil sitting on your camshafts, your lifters, your timing chain, and your bearing surfaces drains back down into the pan, and it takes most of the protection with it. When you start it cold in the morning, those parts are running on whatever thin film stayed behind until the pump can push pressure back up top. That's usually somewhere between 5 and 20 seconds, depending on the oil, the temperature, and how tired the engine is. Manufacturers won't say this out loud because it costs them money and not you. Most engine wear doesn't happen at 70 miles an hour on the highway. It happens in the first few seconds of a cold start, in your own driveway, and the thicker and cheaper the oil in there, the longer that unprotected window lasts. 2 Camrys came through the same month, both a little past 160,000. One had been on conventional oil stretched out to 8 and 10,000 miles for its whole life. The other had run full synthetic on a 5,000-mile schedule since new. The stretched one had a chain rattle on cold start and needed guides and a tensioner. That ticket came to $2,140. The other one started silent, and the cam lobes still had their factory finish on them. Same car, same mileage, same climate. One of them just never had a dry start that lasted. The fix is 2 things, and neither one is hard. Run a full synthetic in the grade printed on your oil cap because synthetic flows cold and clings to metal in a way conventional oil doesn't. Then give it 20 or 30 seconds after a cold start before you put it under load. Don't rev it, don't drop it in gear and pull straight out. Let the pressure come up first. A chain job runs $1,800 to $2,600 on most 4 cylinders. 30 seconds is a cheap alternative. That damage is inside the engine where you can't see it. This next one you can go look at with your own eyes tomorrow morning. Number 7, rust bonding your brake pads to your rotors. Your rotors are bare cast iron with no coating on the friction surface, and dew starts forming on them a few hours after you park. By sunrise, there's a light orange film on every one of them, and the first few stops scrub it off. What isn't normal is what happens when you park wet. Come home in the rain or straight out of a car wash, put the car away hot, and that moisture sits trapped between a warm pad and a warm rotor all night. Here's what most drivers never realize. The pad doesn't just get rusty next to the rotor. It corrodes onto it. In the morning, you get a bang when you pull away and a shudder through the pedal for the next few miles, and every time that happens, it pulls material off the rotor face and leaves a low spot behind. Go look tomorrow before you start the car. Get down and look at the face of the front rotor through the wheel. If you see a bright ring where the pad sits and orange everywhere else, that's normal. If you see pitting or a rough ridge you can catch a fingernail on, that car has been parking wet for a long time. The fix is a habit, not a part. If you've been through rain or a wash, take the car around the block before you put it away so the heat dries the rotors off. And in a damp climate, don't set the parking brake on a wet car overnight if there's any chance of a freeze. Leave it in park on level ground instead, or the shoes will be stuck to the drums in the morning. Rotors and pads on one axle run $340 to $520 at most shops. A trip around the block runs nothing. At least brakes give you a warning you can feel. The next one changes overnight without ever telling you a thing. Number 6. Your tire pressure falling while you sleep. Air contracts when it cools, and the rule is close to 1 pound of pressure for every 10 degrees the temperature drops. A fall night that goes from 70 in the afternoon to 35 before sunrise takes 3.5 pounds out of every tire, and the first cold snap of the year can take 5 or 6. You feel none of it because the tires warm back up within a few miles of leaving. Here's what they don't tell you at the tire shop. The warning light on your dash isn't an early alert. Most systems don't trigger until you're 25% below the recommended pressure. On a car that calls for 35 pounds, that light stays dark until you're down around 26, and a tire has been chewing up its outer shoulders and running hot for weeks by the time you see it. I've measured a lot of tires on cars that came in for something else entirely, and in October and November, low is the rule rather than the exception. 2 or 3 pounds down across all four is where most people live without knowing it, and it's costing them tread life and fuel. Set your pressure to the number on the sticker in the driver's door jamb, not the number molded into the tire sidewall, which is the maximum the tire can hold and not what your car is asking for. Check it in the morning before you drive anywhere, because cold pressure is the only honest reading you'll get. A good digital gauge is $15. A set of 4 tires killed early on the shoulders is $700 to $1,000. Tires at least wear out where you can watch it happen. The next one is quietly rotting apart that costs more than all 4 of them put together, and it's doing it from the inside. Number 5. Your exhaust rotting from the inside out. Burning a gallon of gasoline produces close to a gallon of water, and most of it leaves as vapor out the tailpipe. That only works once the exhaust is hot enough to keep it as vapor. On a short drive, it never gets there. The water condenses inside the muffler and the pipes, and then you park, and it sits in the low spots against bare steel for the next 12 hours. Here's what dealers know and won't bring up. Your exhaust doesn't rust through from the outside where you can see it. It rots from the inside where you can't. That's why a car from a dry state with a clean underbody still drops a muffler at 120,000 miles. A retired school bus driver out near Spokane brought in a 2013 Mazda 6 for a rattle he thought was a heat shield. It was the muffler full of rust flakes with the seam opened up from the inside. He drove that car 2 miles each way to a part-time job and almost nothing else. The bill came to $865 for the muffler and mid-pipe. The fix is heat. Once a week, take it out for 20 minutes of real driving so the whole exhaust gets hot enough to steam that water out. That's a part you can replace. The next one takes something with it that costs a lot more than a muffler. Number 4, your battery quietly losing charge while it sits. A healthy battery loses a small percentage of its charge just sitting there, and that rate climbs as the plates age. Park it several nights in a row, and it slides down to a partial state of charge. And a partially charged lead-acid battery grows hard sulfate crystals on its plates. That's not a gradual thing you can reverse later. Every night spent at partial charge takes capacity off that battery permanently. Here's what most drivers never realize. Your alternator was designed to maintain a battery, not to recharge a deeply drawn down one. So a couple of 10-minute errands never put back what the starter pulled out plus what the night took. And the alternator cooks itself at full output trying to catch up. 2 Silverados, same year, same 4-year-old battery. The one driven 40 minutes a day tests fine. The one that goes out twice a week for short hops tests at 60% of its rated cranking amps and is on its second alternator. Same truck, same battery, different sleep schedule. If your car sits more than 2 or 3 days at a stretch, a battery maintainer is $35, plugs into a wall outlet, and holds the charge where it belongs without overcharging. That single item does more for battery life than anything else you can buy. Quick reminder. If this is saving you money, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep making videos like this. Battery replacement runs $240 to $320 on most of these, and the alternator behind it is worse. And that's before we get to why the battery was drawing down in the first place, which is where we're headed at number 1. Number 3, water and acid collecting inside your crankcase. The same condensation that attacks your exhaust happens inside your engine. Combustion pushes water vapor and unburned fuel past the rings into the crankcase, and when the engine cools overnight, that vapor turns back into liquid on cold metal and drips into your oil. Water plus combustion byproducts makes acid, and acid goes after bearing surfaces and the coatings inside your engine while the car is doing absolutely nothing. Manufacturers won't say this because it costs them money and not you. That 10,000-mile oil interval on your sticker was written around highway driving, where the oil gets hot enough to boil moisture off through the crankcase ventilation system. Nobody wrote it for a retired guy running 4 short trips a week. I've pulled a lot of valve covers on short-trip cars past 100,000 miles, and the difference is not subtle. The highway cars are amber and clean underneath. The short-trip cars have a chocolate milk film on the cap and a brown varnish on the baffles, and that's water that never got a chance to leave. Pop your oil cap tomorrow morning before you start it and look at the underside. Amber and wet is what you want. A creamy tan film means moisture is living in there. Get the oil above 212 degrees regularly. That means one uninterrupted 25 to 30-minute drive a week. And cut your interval to 5,000 miles or 6 months, whichever lands first, if most of your driving is short. That covers what the night does to your oil, your battery, and your exhaust. Number 1 is the reason all 3 are working harder than they should be, and it never shuts off. Number 2. The leaks that only show themselves overnight. Seals and gaskets swell when they're hot and shrink when they cool, so a weep that stays sealed while you're driving opens up around 2 in the morning and drips onto the ground. That means the pavement under your car is the best diagnostic tool you own, and it only works while you're asleep. When was the last time you actually looked at the spot where you park? Go out tomorrow before you move the car and study it. Red or brown and slick is transmission or power steering fluid. Green or orange is coolant. Clear water off to the passenger side is just your air conditioning, and it's fine. Here's what they don't want you knowing. A transmission cooler line seeping a few drops a night costs about $180 to replace, and it's the same line that takes the whole transmission with it when it finally lets go on the highway. Drop a comment below. What's on the ground where you park in the morning? Every one of these 9 is worse on a car whose battery is being drained every night by something nobody ever told you was running. Number 1, the modules that never actually go to sleep. Lock your car and walk inside, and it doesn't shut down. The receiver for your key fob keeps listening, the alarm keeps watching. On anything built in the last decade or so, a telematics module keeps checking in on a cell connection you're not using and never asked for. Here's the part they will never say out loud. That draw is not a fault. It's a design decision made before your car reached the lot. And it's the reason a battery that used to last 7 years now lasts 3 or 4. A properly designed car settles down to somewhere under 50 milliamps once the modules time out. I've measured plenty that never get there. 2011 4Runners, both original owners. One drops to 30 milliamps after half an hour. The other sits at 110 all night because a module stopped going to sleep years ago. That second truck eats a battery every other winter, and every shop it visited sold it a battery instead of finding the draw. The fix is a draw test, and any shop can do it in under an hour for around $125. They pull a meter reading 40 minutes after the car is locked, and if it's still high, they pull fuses one at a time until the number drops and tell you exactly which module is refusing to shut off. 2 more things you can do tonight. Keep your fob well away from the car. Some systems keep the receiver awake if the key is sitting on a hook by the door. If the car sits for stretches, put it on that maintainer. They built a car that never stops drawing from a battery you have to pay for. Knowing that is what lets you stop replacing batteries and fix the actual problem. Your car isn't sleeping out there. Now you know what it's doing, and you know how to make it cost you less. If you want to know which dashboard warning light means stop driving right now and which one can wait until Monday, click the video on the left. I'll see you there.